Welcome to my studio here on the South Shores of Boston, Massachusetts, and welcome to the Weekly. Actually, I wanted to do an on location today, but it's dreary out and it's been raining on and off, so this is as close as I could get to being outside. And if you recall, last week I also did a weekly outside, and it was right on that bench right there, and I wanted to try to capture one of my favorite places to meditate. There's a Japanese garden right behind me, and I'm not sure how much of the camera is catching that. You might be seeing the very end of that garden, but that's why I wanted to have the camera positioned out here. It's just one of my favorite places to be quiet and to meditate. And as some of you know, if you watched last week's Weekly, I've been away on retreat all last week, and I was able to spend some time back here with this Japanese garden. So I'm coming off of retreat, and I'm coming off of my social media fast. I have not been on anything all week long, so I'm back on social media today with this kind of an update for you of where the studio is heading into this coming week, and sometimes I recap what happened during the past week. During the past week, I was not in the studio a whole lot, just a little bit, just concentrating on being on retreat. And if you want to know the difference between a retreat and a vacation, watch last week's The Weekly. So I'm back on social media, and I wanted to continue to just kind of give you a forecast of some big changes that are going to be happening with the studio. Last week we talked about some changes, and this week we'll cover another major change. If you have been following me on Facebook and on the Weekly, I talk a lot about the charities that the studio is involved with. And basically there's three main charities that I give to. I'm sure many of you know of OneTreePlanted.org. I talk about that a lot. I belong to Creative Capital, which is a foundation that supports the arts, specifically helping individual artists out with their particular projects, with their careers. It's an artist resource. They've been very active during the pandemic in making sure the arts survive during this pandemic. And then the other organization is Four Oceans, an organization dedicated to cleaning up our ocean waters around the world. All of these great organizations I have been contributing to with the purchase of artwork on my website or personally in the studio, however those purchases happen. I'm always donating money to those organizations through those art purchases. So first of all, I want to say thank you for supporting those organizations. It is your purchase of artwork which helps those organizations do the work that they do. So, a major change being implemented this week in the studio. I have decided to eliminate two organizations and pick up one organization, contributing to only two organizations. And I want to explain to you, the buyer, why I'm doing that. First and foremost, I am doubling down on my commitment with OneTreePlanted.org. Every time a piece of artwork is purchased, at least one tree is planted with the purchase of every artwork. The larger pieces, especially larger, meaning the pieces that are more financially, I usually plant more than one tree with those larger purchases, especially like with originals versus prints. So thank you for purchasing my artwork, and thank you for planting trees. It's my way to give back to Mother Earth. I'm sure you've heard me say this many times, but I am so inspired and moved by scenes like I have behind me in the background here, or the water plays a huge part in my artwork, even when it's not explicitly a seascape. Looking at the ocean inspires me. And so if you peruse OneTreePlanted.com, planting trees just don't help the air and the environment, but they actually help renew our oceans. If you take a look at their website, there's a whole category of where they're planting, and part of the plantings happen right along the oceans to help recover our oceans. So I'm doubling down on my commitment to One Tree Planted. So the other two organizations are being dropped because I'm picking up one very large organization and a key player in peace and security in the world and the promotion of democracy in the world. And that is moving forward, purchasing artwork. A portion of those purchases will go to the United Nations Fund. And I'm doing that simply because the world needs this organization, because so much is happening throughout this world, from climate change to war to general instability in many, many countries throughout the world. And the United Nations is so involved with bringing security in those places of the world that seem to be falling apart. And they're such a promoter. I mean, the United Nations was formed on the principle of keeping together the social fabric of society, keeping together our social contract as a human race, not just country to country, but as a society, as a world society. We are all interconnected, and it seems to me that the social contract that weaves together the fabric of humanity, it seems to be unraveling and falling apart. And to my mind, the United Nations is the place where we try to reweave and tighten that social fabric, reminding each other, even if we're enemies, that we have this common fabric that weaves us together, and we are responsible to each other, whether we're a mile apart or 1,000 miles apart. And so I'm contributing to the United Nations Fund with the purchase of every piece of artwork, and it seems like such a small drop in the bucket. But you know what? It's my drop in the bucket, and it's your drop in the bucket. And when we combine those drops, we can affect change throughout the world with an organization of that magnitude. So thank you for the purchase of your artwork, and thank you for contributing to these great organizations that I think help change the world and make it a better place for all of us. A brief note about the studio this week. I have, again, a lot of things are going on, and I'll continually to update you next week as I progress along. I just wanted to remind you that the new website will be coming, hopefully by the end of this week. That's kind of my self-made target. It's been a lot harder to execute this website than the current website that I'm on. That's why it's taking so long. But my goal is next week, or by the end of next week, you should be seeing a new website. Keep your eye open on that. And I reminded you last week, and I'll remind you again, if you have any inclination, any debating about a particular piece that you're eyeing up on this current website, I suggest you purchase it. Because the new website, I am eliminating certain series and certain collections of work will no longer be available. So you might want to purchase that piece if you're wavering, because it might not be around with a new website. And secondly, I have a new color field coming out. These pieces are inspired by Matisse. His outlines that he did specifically in the Matisse Chapel, they just inspired me to create this whole series that I'm calling Color Fields. And a new major one is coming out. This is a very large piece. It will be made available with prints, so you can buy the smaller version if you don't have a 4x5 area in your home to hang it. So I think I'm going to be listing that on Tuesday. Very colorful, very abstract. You can dive right into this piece, just like diving into a Matisse chapel. So keep your eye out for that. And that's what's going on in the studio this week. I'm going to focus in on finishing that particular piece and listing it, and really focusing in on trying to get my website finished and put up so you can see all the great new features that I'm offering you, my prospective buyer. Thank you for all your support with the charities, with my artwork, and I'll see you next week. Hopefully I'll be able to be on location next week to share with you a new place that I have been photographing. Until then, stay creative.